and welcome to Simply Human YouTube channel and podcast. I'm Christina Caro, clinical psychologist, and this is my partner, Karen Lee Linsky, executive leadership and self-trust coach. Hi, Karen. Welcome back.
Hey, Christine. I'm so excited to continue and be present for this next one. So we're talking today about the introverted feeling, right?
Yes, the introverted feeling, which is your decision-making function. So
Yes.
we'll get some firsthand insight today. And folks, I'm getting over a little bit of a head cold, so I might sound a little bit stuffy. So I apologize for that, but just hang in there with me. If you are new to the channel and you are just landing here as your first episode, this is the 8th of 8 episodes covering the cognitive function types as described by Carl Jung in his 1923 book, Psychological Types. And his cognitive function types are about the preferences we have for how we process information that we gather, how we take in information, and then how we organize and make decisions on that data, which he calls the judging function. And these are cognitive processing preferences. And the reason we say preferences is that it is in the hard wiring, but similar to handedness, like I'm a dominant right-handed person. If I had to write with my left hand, I could. And over time, if I wanted to develop that skill, I could develop it over time through practice. But left to my own device, if I don't want to think about input energy, it's automatic. I just automatically go to my right hand. So that helps you have an analogy to what we're talking about these preferences for how we gather data and how we make decisions. And the reason we felt it was important to share this information in our Simply Human podcast, which is all kinds of information to help us understand being human and our human experience, is that the influence of how we orient towards information and time, what those biases are, and then how we tend to organize and make decisions about it influences a lot of aspects of what we call personality. And because people don't understand about this neurodiversity, that we have these differences, there tends to be a lot of conflict and misunderstanding because we think everyone thinks the way we do. We think everyone gathers data the way we do. We think people make decisions, or they should make decisions the way we do. So this series has been to help educate people. There are these differences, and because we want to invite you to be curious and suspend your judgment, because it is very likely that your partner, your child, your sibling, your parent has a different processing style than you. And this may give you insight into how to understand them better, connect better, be curious, suspend judgment, and even form closer relationships and reduce conflict.
It also is going to help us reduce conflict in the workplace too, because a lot of times when you come in and you're feeling that they just don't understand you, is to take that pause and curiosity, because this actually helped me begin to actually take my coaching a little bit differently, because I'm more open to some other things. I'm more curious, but now I'm understanding where they might be rooted. And I think it just allows you to get like a heads up, so you're not angry with it at first, like, you don't understand. I mean, it's because they're just coming from a different perspective, and there's no right or wrong. It even made me cognizantly aware of that my percentage of people showing up is small compared to some other percentages, which allowed me to really kind of said, wow, now I understand why the way I'm showing up doesn't always work for a lot of people. And I can reduce things. So this is why I'm so excited that when you guys look at this full series, that you will notice and learn some things, not only about yourself, but a lot of other people as well. But again, before we start, I gotta tell you, we hope that you will help us out and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share, hit that notification button so you know when we have all these new podcasts. And we're just so excited about what we're able to share and the comments that we've gotten so far. And for those of you on the podcast, just hit the text us link in the show notes for your comments and questions so that we could answer them.
And folks, don't forget, recently learned that for some reason, if you write a comment, 7 words is the magic number for YouTube to recognize it as meaningful engagement.
Wow.
So if you could help us out with getting this video out in front of people and writing something in the comments, like 7 words in the comment, would actually really help us and our algorithm get out. We want to answer your questions, and some of you have been sending questions through Gmail, which we appreciate. But if you don't mind putting a comment into YouTube, that would just really help us get this video out
even
there.
more, right? Because sometimes because of the algorithm, and also watching it to the very end really helps us too. So let's get into that episode, this episode of Introverted Feeling. What is this introverted feeling cognitive process? And why do you call it the inner compass?
Well, let me go into it because this is actually Karen's auxiliary function. So if we've been using the metaphor of a car, that these cognitive processes, we do have the ability to cultivate many of them, maybe not all of them, but many of them. And what I'm focusing on is people who have this as their dominant function. So that would be equivalent to the driver in a car. Auxiliary, or the second function, which is this shows up for Karen as her second, would be the co-pilot, the passenger seat in the car. Some people may have this as their third, but it's not that developed. It's like the teenager in the back of the car. And in some people, it might be like really underdeveloped. It's like the toddler in the back of the car. And then for the rest of the folks, it's in the trunk of the car where like you may never even encounter this. This is a in the trunk of the car function for me, actually. So this is a function that's hard for me to access, and I have had to actually really work on it. And even in working on it, I can only access it if I'm not around any people. If I'm around people, my extroverted feeling is instantly lights up in my brain. My outward focus feeling turns on, and then it's really, really difficult for me to access this introverted feeling. So what is introverted feeling? It is a judging function, and it's what Jung called a rational function. So I explained this last week, that all judging functions he termed rational because you are actually organizing, sorting, and coming to a conclusion, as opposed to the irrational functions, which is all the perceiving, where you're just, data's just coming in. You're not doing anything with it. It's just an acquisition of information. And the reason I emphasize this because he called it a feeling function, and people get that confused with emotional decision making. And once again, emotions are a separate thing. You could be a thinking type and a logical type, but be very heated, be very emotional. So that's different, being coming from your emotions. Introverted feeling is an internal values-based criteria decision-making process that happens within a person, within their sense of strongly held personal values. It is tied to a sense of personal authenticity, and it's experienced as an inner compass. It's that inner guide. Some people experience it and talk about it as my gut. I follow my gut. That's introverted feeling. When you feel it in your gut and you trust it and you follow it, that's what we're talking about. Does that sound familiar to you,
And
Karen?
it's so interesting. Because I guess I didn't pick it up last time because I loved it when you said, I want to say this to you, and you correct me if I say it incorrectly, but the whole point of it's not tied to our feelings or emotions, okay? Because I think we always think about F equals feelings equals emotions, because that's what we always describe in
Yes.
the human language is feelings means you're emotional, right? And I love that you differentiated this. And I think that's the whole point of why we go a little bit deeper in our podcast, because you don't assume, this whole thing about extroverted and introverted means they're shy and they're bookworms and all this other stuff. We talked about that at the very first series, right? Same thing with the feelings. It's not all about them being emotional or making emotional decisions. And so I think that's the whole point of why we're bringing these podcasts to everybody.
Yes, and this type in particular, because it is the introverted felt sense, they often have experienced in their life criticism as being Oh, you're being emotional.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. That label, you're emotional. I got that a lot, but I'm
Yeah.
not. So,
Yeah, so I want to make that distinction again that yes, it is called a feeling
mhm,
function, and this one is in the introverted attitude, that inward focus. But it is called feeling because it is based on strongly held, in this case, internal
mhm,
values, versus mine, which is extroverted feeling, which is based on those external social community norms.
mm,
This is based on internal, strongly held personal values, a personal felt sense. So, like I said, people say
mm,
my gut. Most people who say, oh, I make my decisions from my gut would not ever say, I make emotional decisions, right? When you say I come from my gut, they know that that's solid. And when we talk about being emotional, we generally think of someone being angry, someone being upset, being impulsive. That's not what this function is. There are two types that have this as their dominant function in the Jung's typology world. And this is where we cross into the Myers Briggs type instrument and the Myers Briggs classification of personality types. Many of you are likely familiar with this. And the dominant types based on the Myers Briggs type instrument is introvert, sensing, feeling, perceiving, ISFP, which is 8.8% of the population, and INFP, introvert, intuitive, feeling, and perceiving, and they're 4.4% of the population. So they are the dominant introverted feeling. ISFPs combine it with an extroverted sensing here and now, pragmatic, five senses, data collection. And the INFP combines their introverted feeling with that extroverted, intuitive possibilities. What could something
mhm.
be? Way of perceiving. Now, the other two who have it as auxiliary are the ESFP, that's 8.5% of the population, and
Me.
ENFP, which is 8.1%. That's Karen's side, 8.1. So total, this is almost 30%, 29.8% of the population. So it's a good size of the population that makes their decision this way. Remember, we just had elections, and if you ever listen to people talk, a lot of people would say, I went with the feels.
That's like
That person
that.
resonated. When we say, oh, that resonance, a lot of people, many people experienced it. We all, again, to some degree, experience it. And if you ever had that feeling of, oh, that resonates with me, that is your introverted feeling giving you a signal.
Yeah,
It's
and
cool.
it's interesting. So I feel like that gut feeling. It is interesting for me because resonate. It feels like internally. You're right. Like it's a gut feeling. I really think I'm
Mhm.
getting better at that now. So I think my auxiliary is showing up a lot more than it used to. I think it's a lot stronger, and so I really, really love that because it reminds me that it is like the inner compass within me. I love those analogies that we use. So
Well, yeah, and let's give a real life example, Karen, from yesterday. So, yesterday, I had been doing this training that had really moved me. It was doing training on serving military servicemen, veterans, and families. And there was a lot of videos, and I was really emotional. And during the break, I got in touch with Karen, and when she called, like, I was actually really upset. I was crying because I was so moved, and she knew something was wrong. Like, her introverted feeling, her first thing out of her mouth was, what's wrong? Do I need to
mhm.
fly out there?
That was my gut. My gut was
Right?
like, "I'm there for you, Christina. You want me to come out, right?" You were, like, really heavy crying. I'm like, "Oh my god, I gotta go." I'm, like, ready to go, right? Exactly.
Right, the
Yeah.
decision. But then immediately, so that was the first introvert feeling decision. And then immediately she went into extroverted intuition and
Which is
20
my dominant,
questions.
which is
Because
my dominant.
I couldn't quite, it's her dominant. So I couldn't quite get the words out. And Karen went into, is it this?
Is that
Is it this? Is it your dog? Is it this? Is it this? Is that this? Just like 20 questions, like
but
extroverted
you
intuiting,
right.
brainstorming. What's the
But you did
possibility?
say, "No, no, no." And then it was funny because Christina said, "Karen, stop. Just let me get can you just stop and let me just"
Get
yeah,
my
get my words.
words.
So, I mean, that's the whole point of this, right? Is the fact that she realizes what I was doing and she asked and I love it because that was your request and I heard your request. And I think that's the whole point. I didn't get mad or anything. I was like, "Okay, that's it." I think the more we can recognize that But it was really funny when you said that to me because I automatically went there because all of a sudden I gut wise I knew that's what I wanted to do or something, right? It was that inner compass. I felt like that drive to say that.
Right, her inner compass went, and then her dominant function, which is let me gather the
Mhm.
data. What could it
Yeah,
possibly be?
I
Boom,
know.
boom,
I went
boom,
with your
boom.
I think I went with your dog first. "Is Sophie okay?" That's what I went for because she's getting going like, "Is Sophie okay?" I said that so it was funny. So, I think one thing that I want to move into that I think really makes it even more concrete is those fictional examples that we use for the dominant one. Can you share
Yeah.
those for us?
So they were actually two. I normally just do one of each of the dominant, and but this time there were two for ISFP that I wanted to highlight for different reasons. So let me just go through them. So this is introverted feeling dominant combined with extroverted sensing. And we've talked about how extroverted sensing is a physicality to it. It's the five senses. It's in the present moment. You see it a lot with athletes, artists,
Mm,
musicians, these types. So the two examples I have. So the first one is Linus Van Pelt from Peanuts. And he's such a perfect example of ISFP. He's thoughtful and authentic, but he is guided by his own compass. It's his personal beliefs. He believes in the great pumpkin. And he will sit in that pumpkin patch. And even though there's all this social pressure, which an extroverted feeler tends to be tuned in to, well, everybody else says that this is dumb, so well, I'm going to go instead and go trick or treat with them. Minus is introverted feeling. It's like a strongly held belief in this myth of the great pumpkin. And regardless of what anyone says to him, he stays true to his introverted feeling and he goes. He doesn't compromise. Like, he's an example of a non traumatized introverted feeling type. Because I have to tell you, if any of you who are listening to this are mental health care providers, introverted feelers make up a huge percentage likely of your population, especially if you work with the high sensitive population.
mm.
And that is because this type, there's a lot of social pressure to not trust that inner feeling. And so there's a lot of wounding, and then they end up in therapy. And so mostly what I do when I'm working with this population is to reconnect them to their inner compass. They have clearly lost touch with the inner compass, and they're trying to make decisions with extroverted thinking, with logic, with extroverted feeling. Well, what do other people want? But then they never know why they make the decision because it's completely detached from the inner compass. And so then they're anxious. They have trouble having self confidence. They feel confused a lot. They tend to lose themselves in others because they're not anchored into where they need to be anchored. So, this is why I wanted to do Linus because he was such a good example of introverted feeler. But the next example is kind of an example of what can happen when there's wounding, which is any of you saw the movie The Hunger Games or read the book,
Yeah. Yep.
Katniss Everdeen.
Katniss Everdeen.
She's become a beacon of hope for the rebellion.
Primrose Everdeen. I volunteer! I volunteer! I volunteer as tribute! No! No!
Such bravery.
People are looking at you, Kat.
I don't want anyone looking to me. I never asked for this. I never asked to be in the game. I just wanted to save my sister. Keep Peeta alive.
She's such a great example. Just also, you see that dominant introversion. There's a lot going on in her mind. If you read the books, you know most of what's going on is just her inner world. And I thought the film actually did a good job. It's mostly in her facial expression, but she chooses to sacrifice to save her sister, that strong moral compass.
Yeah.
But she also does her own thing. I mean, she's very individualistic. She has that athleticism you see with SP, her instinct, her ability to use the bow and arrow. Even when she gets her allies in the later book, she still does what she believes is right as opposed to what everyone else is saying. No, this is what we have to do. She's like, no, her deep loyalty to rescue Peeta, or she'll even turn on the people because it's that integrity, those values. So even if you're my ally, but you turn and you start to violate that, you're now my enemy. Like, I don't trust you anymore. But she's very wounded. You see the PTSD. You see the confusion. You see when an introverted feeling person is experiencing that internal disruption in their values, it causes deep, deep pain, distress, trauma. So I thought, oh, wow, this is really interesting to have these two different examples of ISFP. ISFPs are actually considered the most sensitive of the 16 personality types, with
So when
INFPs being second most sensitive.
and when you say sensitive, explain that word to me when you use the word sensitive.
Because of the nature of introverted feeling, that it is so deep inside, they're very empathetic and they feel things very deeply. They also sense other people's feelings, and their energy is actually it's moving within their own body.
Oh, okay.
Wherever they have strong values. So if they have, say, a strong value around fairness and they experience unfairness, they will feel disruption internally. Now, I also have, because in my extroverted feeling and values around fairness and justice, but you will more see my upset, right? I extrovert my feeling. You will see my outrage, and it's, it drives me into action. The introverted feeling types feel the disruption of it and first have to deal with, like,
The internal.
They have to take care of themselves first. And so
Yeah.
that's a lot of therapy is working on resilience, because if you're going to feel this much, you have to really build resilience to continue to then, how does this motivate your actions? And maybe they do act, maybe they don't. A lot of times what introverted feeler types will do, they will distance themselves. They will say, you don't have integrity. I don't want to have anything to do with you.
Let's go back to the fictional characters. I know you have one for an INFP. So who's your INFP fictional character?
So again, Harry Potter fans, Luna Lovegood is a perfect example of this. So you see that similarity with the SFP of the unwavering authenticity to her own beliefs.
Oh,
Remember,
definitely.
she believes in the Niggles. I think they're called Niggles, the invisible creatures. And even though no one else believes, she's out there putting up flyers and advocating for them. So she deeply held beliefs. But you also see it combined with that extroverted intuitive. Like, she knows Harry has experienced suffering. She's not surprised when he can see the invisible creatures that pull the chariots. She sees him too, and she knows, like, oh, you've experienced suffering. Like, she has this intuition that is, you see it combined with the introverted feeling as just what one of my colleagues who has this called is psychological faith.
Oh, I like that term.
Yeah, psychological faith. A lot of intuitive types, especially my type, because we're challenged all the time, because what we see is in the future and we can't always point to why it's going to happen or the proof of it yet, because it's yet to happen. And so there's like stress and angst. INFPs, ISFPs, you don't, or INFPs particularly, you don't see, they don't care. They don't have the extrovert feeling. They know what they feel. They trust their intuition. It's a psychological faith. They may not know how to explain it. They don't need to explain it. They just know that it's true. Again, these are the type that don't need therapy. They just know that it's true. When you are around this personality type that's grounded, they have an effect on the group. They have an effect on the individual where you will not know why, but you will feel instantly calm, because they're centered and grounded in their values and their truth, that the chaos around them calms down. When I was trained in this 25 years ago, then there was one INFP and she did her presentation. The room got really quiet when she presented. And then the guy behind me said, I don't know what just happened, but all I know is suddenly it feels like everything's going to be okay. God is okay. Like, I don't know what just happened, but I just like, and we're all like going, yeah, dude. Yeah. Like, we don't know what happened either, but everyone's feeling this way. And you see that in Harry Potter movies with Luna.
I see that. Everybody does. I even calmed down with her, with the way she talked, very slow, calming. Yeah. So guys, it's a superpower of yours, you INFPs. And
yes. Yes, you are. But again, they get so overwhelmed, a lot can tend to isolate. Now, there's a lot of what I call social introverts,
Yeah.
INFPs. So if you are this type, just know that you like people, but you have to manage that battery because your cup is smaller. And
Yeah,
so
right,
to
right.
be your best self in the world, making sure you are trusting that gut feeling of when your cup is full and then go and take your personal time.
So tell me a little bit about some of the other things, the core aspects of them. We talked a little bit about the internal value systems, really important. You told me a lot about
Yeah.
authenticity,
Yeah, so
right?
introverted feeling is strongly held moral
Mhm.
values and that they have a strong emotional awareness. So let's kind of move on to the gifts,
Mhm.
if that's okay, Karen. And
Perfect.
then I would love for you to add to this list in terms of what you see in yourself. But you see, like for Karen, I can tell you with Karen, it took me a long time. Now, even though I've been doing this for a really long time, I'm generally really good at typing people without the assessment by just observing behavior. I had a really hard time with Karen for years and years and years because she has a lot of her internal values are other focused, are about people, that it has that real extroverted feeling flavor to it. But so it took a while to get the clarity, but there's an aspect of, again, introverted feeling. It's very much coming from my worldview, right? Karen, you've made comments about your husband saying you're not the
Yeah,
center of the universe.
revolves around you. You think that the world revolves around you, but it doesn't. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is introverted feeling, it does come from that strong moral conviction, deeply held personal authenticity, emotional depth, personal integrity. So you hear the I. Like there
Yeah.
was a consultant I worked with. It was so interesting. When I work with somebody on developing a resume, it's about them. Tell me about yourself. Wow, you're really great at that. We can phrase it this way. It really captures your essence. So I worked with someone with Karen's personality type, and she would look at a resume and say, I don't like this. Here. I like this. Here. I give it back. It was like, I. Either she liked it or she didn't like it. And I'm listening going, how is that helpful? Like, that's just your subjective opinion. You're not giving them anything that's actually what to do. She would just say, I like it. I don't like it. It was so interesting. Such a different way of working on the same task, how it's executed. Hers was based on whether she liked the resume or didn't like the here, do it again. So very different. And I think we have actually touched on a lot of the strengths that
Mhm.
personal, like the integrity, like it is painful for introverted feeling types to do something that doesn't feel right to them. Like you want to wound an introverted feeler, and Karen, you can speak to this.
I
We would
can
talk
speak
about
to
this a
this one.
lot. When you would take jobs that I knew was not lining up with you suffered, right?
Oh, yeah. Because I'm the main breadwinner and I was so much into the money and had to make it a job because I had to get a job. It wasn't the right job, it was a job. And then as a result of it, I made a bad decision that I suffered the whole time. And
He suffered.
yeah, to the fact of where I mean, if I had not left, I'm sure they would have let me go because it was, now it's interesting for me too, because that's when I also grew up a lot. And I think where I let my what do I want to say, like the outside pressures of being breadwinner and having to have a job kind of not go with my values of being what I'm really good at and love to do. Right. And so it's just interesting
Right,
because,
right.
main breadwinner, money, oh, we're gonna go homeless if I don't get a job. Right. And so some of that played in. And so I think that, yeah, yeah, yeah. But
But
it's also
remember,
makes sense to me where I'm personally very authentic. But what's interesting that I want to talk about is about emotional depth. When you talked about the gifts of the FI and emotional depth, can you explain to me what you mean by that?
well, again, this is a little bit more the dominant type. So they very similar to, INFJs, where I described that our inner world, it's more like the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's below the water. It's the same with introverted feeling. And this is a gift and a curse. So
Hmm.
the best
Interesting.
I have come to understand what is going on under the waterline
Okay.
Is introverted, so extroverted feeling and extroverted thinking are outward decision making processes. The drive is to come to a quick conclusion to execute. All right. It's clarity in the moment. Introverted feeling is a constantly shifting, moving flow of awareness, a constantly shifting flow of felt sense from moment to moment. So it's hard for them because it's one, we've talked about how it's hard to put language to that inner world, especially something phenomenological like a felt sense, a knowing. And that's how introverted feeling, that compass is, because they're getting information, like that extroverted perceiving is taking in information. Decisions are happening. That's why it's moving and shifting. This is good. This doesn't feel good. I like this. I don't like this. It's moving, 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 moving. But you may not see it extroverted. It's all happening in the inner world until at some point they're like, this is too much. And they shut down and like, I'm not. So
And
this
then
depth, it's about a felt sense.
does it affect your decision making? Because I feel like that affects my decision making.
Yes. Yes. Well,
Yeah.
you speak.
Right.
How does it affect your decision making?
I just can't make that because I keep bringing more information in, so I can't settle. And
Yes.
so, so then I'm like, and then that's why I'm pressure prompted because once I have to make a decision, like, okay, I'll make a decision. But I kind of like let things go until I have to make that decision and then I can settle. It's very interesting.
Yeah, let's go into the challenges. So that shift, that constant flow and shifting can make being decisive difficult, or introverted feelers can feel like they're pressured to come up with an external decision and then they doubt because it might have shifted internally 5 minutes later, but now they've already put the decision out there.
That happens to me
all the time, right? Then it's like, I just don't follow through. So it can look like not following through, but the problem is that the compass has shifted. It's like, I no longer am in integrity with that decision, but now I made it and people are counting on it, but I don't feel it anymore. So now I have no energy and I know it's wrong. And it's just this turmoil, right? That challenges there can be a tremendous amount of inner turmoil. It can be like Karen said with her husband, it can appear selfish. The ENFPs and the ESFPs, the criticism of how introverted feeling comes across is selfish because it's what feels right to me in the moment. And it sometimes, like Karen, you have a value around others, but there's a lot who don't. And so it's just, it doesn't matter what happens to other people. It doesn't matter what other people think. This is what feels right to me. So like I got into huge dismay with someone I dated who had this because he would make this decision to go kind of carve up public lands with his dirt bike and called it my trail, like carving it up. And it was my trail. He didn't have a permit. He didn't have permission. I know there's Native American sickness.
Jeez.
So I extroverted feeler, right? I'm like, you don't have a permit. This is not your land. It's public land. There's Native American sensitive sites. You don't know where that is. Like all these external criteria, right? And he's like, it's not an issue, right? Because it feels like what he wants to do. And so he just goes and does it and calls it I'm going to go work on my trail. My head would explode. My head would explode. Such dissonance. Like, how do you do that? You're so and I would try really hard not to frame it as selfishness because I know in some ways it's not, but at the same time it is, because it just doesn't factor in these other things and it only serves himself. So you can see how it comes out as selfish. I have a boss who has Karen's type. So ideas, but she's a boss. She's a director. So she was constantly putting new ideas, which staff felt like then they have to implement without really, thinking like what was happening to staff. They're getting overwhelmed, but it's like, oh, this is a great idea. And then I'll look good if I do this was kind of about it.
And I think it's interesting. Like I said, I remember I was facilitating and sometimes it makes me a good facilitator to have to be present, in the moment. But that's why I've learned actually to use the word that whatever my decision is, I've learned to really keep it as that's my pocket decision or my decision going in. Right. And so I give my freedom. And it gave me the ability to accept my gift. right? And sometimes that's that language, right? And I think it's interesting about when we talk about the struggle with the internal and external harmony, because our harmony is important. Because I think, okay,
Internal harmony.
yeah, internal and external harmony, the struggle between those two
Yeah.
was one
Yeah.
of the challenges, right? It's like, you know, so it's
Yeah.
interesting.
And can like the challenge, if I can share it, and Karen, like when you would send me job listings and I
Mhm.
would read it and know, like, why are you sending this to me? Like, this is
Yeah,
so not you. You would be
yeah,
miserable.
yeah,
You'd
yeah,
say, can you remind me what I'm good at? So
yeah,
question, can you remind me what I'm good at? Really, really common with this type, again, because it's constantly shifting and moving. Sometimes they have a hard time of nailing it down. And so, it's because it shifts and it shifts and it shifts and it shifts. And it's like, what am I good? Do I like this? And unless you've really learned to turn inward and feel where it's located in your body and understand what the signals feel like, you can end up like having an inner confusion. So that could be a struggle.
yeah,
Um,
and that's why I sent it to you, because I knew I had a struggle.
right.
I feel like with that.
And me, I'm an extroverted feeler. So my decisions, my judgment is based on how does it affect another person. So I am the right person to come to because I could look at it and say, this will harm you. Right. And I like, no. I always send her a barfing emoji.
And then sometimes I still apply and didn't get the job, so it all worked out. So, I mean, I applied and there was, like, no response, so it worked out. So we're like,
But
"Oh,
this is
thank
so common. This
God."
is a common challenge. What Karen is describing is the common challenge is that
Yeah.
if you haven't cultivated the psychological faith, you make these decisions against your own interests compulsively. And it's when you develop that reconnection, and for Karen, since it's secondary, it is a little bit harder. It's not like the ISFP or the INFP who can be super grounded. It's still like, but what about this? But what about that? Like that extrovert and intuitive for
That's
Karen is always going
Trilogy.
to distract her from staying long enough in her own inner feelings to
Ugh.
stay with it. Now, we don't see it as much with the ESFPs because they're in the now. They just like make the decision and go on. And if it doesn't work out, they make a new decision in the now and go on. And if that doesn't work out, they make a new decision with the gut. So even though the introverted feeling is shifting, they just make multiple decisions in that
Yeah,
moment.
yeah,
So you don't
yeah.
see the struggle at all. With ESFPs are so much fun to be around, actually. They're generally pretty optimistic, positive people, impulsive, but man, they have like enormous resilience because they're like, just make a new decision. Like this, not that. Okay, this works. This works for me. This works for me. That it was really interesting. I'll give you another really funny example of a challenge. So I was dating ISFP type, and I'm trying to plan ahead. And I might have told the story about trying to buy groceries for the week. And I'd say, well, what do you think you'd want to have for dinner this week? And his response in the now and based on felt sense is, how would I know I'm not hungry yet? So until I feel hungry, I can't know how to make that decision.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
You're like,
Hey,
okay.
so we're close on time. So what do you want to share as we wrap up?
In terms of where does this type do well and thrive, let's just go over that.
Mhm.
You will find this function type serves well in the fields of ministry, again, your strongly held spiritual beliefs, counseling, because of that, especially that INFPs, because of that, like that Luna intuition and empathy, uh, artists, creative types, because you're using that inner felt world, that deep emotional world to inform your
Mm,
expression creatively.
love
Again, you'll see them in like chefs because it's that extroverted sense. Like ESFPs, you'll find in ISFPs like cooking because of the passion for it, and it's creative at the same time. It's just another creative field. Coaching is another field they can be really good at. In relationships, one of the challenges is they aren't forthcoming on that inner world of decisions. That's something they need to work on, is sharing decisions they're making, because they can appear very withdrawn. They can appear secretive as well. kind of to themselves. And so they do have to have a partner. They do have to work to let that person in. It's really important for those of you who either have this or you have someone in your life who operates this way. Just know that they're not withholding to hurt you. It just doesn't occur to them, one, to share it. And also it's hard to share, because I'll be like, I don't know. I just doesn't feel right. I'm just not feeling it.
So if you were to have someone like that and you know it and you know this is this type of person and they're just not feeling it, what is a question that you could ask that could engage them to, share more of it?
There isn't anything more. If they're able to say, I'm not feeling it, it's more about you trust it.
The fact that they're just not feeling it means they don't in their gut, because they're making the gut, right? The inner compass thing. You just have to trust it and respect that conversation.
Trust and respect.
They don't have to explain. Yeah, exactly. Got it.
You might say something, if it's a SFP, you might say something, well, if something changes, let me know. Same with I know. If something changes, let me know.
I love that.
Which creates it, because it is shifting.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can say things, maybe a group is making decisions. You turn to this person who's usually quiet and observing and say, Marianne, how is that feeling to you? Okay. How is that feeling to you?
Yeah.
And we'll
go
do the Z decision making, how to use it in a group, which will be next week. So that's it. It's that question. How does this feel to you? What does your gut tell you? Those are
the two. Yeah.
And then responding is to trust, and you have to let go of expectations for there to be more explanation.
Yeah, that's what I took away too, was you just accept for the fact that it just doesn't feel right, and they don't have to explain anything more. Because sometimes, you want, tell me, really, because you're trying to dig in deeper, but there's nothing deeper because they can't explain it, right? It's just the gut feeling for them.
Yeah, and what you do is you're basically forcing them into extroverted thinking or explaining their logic, explaining their rationale, and now you've bumped them out of their strength.
They're dominant. Yeah.
And you are forcing them to try to come from a non-dominant function, which may not be developed. And that person will find that experience unpleasant, and over time will just contribute less and less. So they don't have to experience that.
Right. Because then you start to lose trust. Like, you just don't understand me, right? And it becomes more more conflict.
Yeah, it's like,
all right.
Well, the feeling of being forced to constantly go to a non-dominant. Imagine if you were forced to always have to do something really well with your non-dominant hand. Would you feel confident?
No, I would hate that.
You wouldn't. You would hate it. So understand, in all of these preferences, when we're demanding someone to be other than who they are, that's the stress we're putting them under.
Yeah.
Okay?
It's true. Yep. Yeah. So, yay! I love it. I've learned some more, and I've also to share my perspective. So again, we just want to thank everybody for joining us on this episode. And again, we ask you to hit the like button if you enjoyed this. Share it with other people that are in your life that you may want to understand, who maybe this is you, so you want them to understand where you're coming from. Or maybe it's a colleague who you knew that's like some other colleague, or and you want to explain to them, hey, this is John, what do you think? And, hit that notification button. And like Christina said earlier, share in the comments, so that this way that will help our ability to bring this out to more people.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And don't forget to be curious.
Take care. Till next time.